It is never easy to say goodbye to someone you love. When this person is gone, there's a hole where she used to be in our lives. That is the grief that many of us are feeling today. Some of you knew my grandma better than others, but you're here because she had an impact on you all, and you want to honor that. And because she did affect you in some way, it is not going to be easy to say goodbye. At such a challenging time, it is important to remember the good memories we all have with my great-grandmother. By holding on to those memories, we can focus on the good times we had together and help each other find each other comfort in this difficult time. Some of you may remember when my grandma Dorothy would sit in the house and yell at us to close the door because she didn't want her AC to run out. As a child, I found it so upsetting that my grandmother would not allow me to run in and outside of her home. But now I look back at those memories and I am grateful for those times. Or other times where you would call when you were down and she would always find a way to make you smile with an uplifting joke or even a slightly inappropriate one. My grandmother always knew how to cheer us up and keep our spirits high. And although she is no longer here, we will treasure those memories with her for the rest of our lives. My grandmother was born November 30th, 1929. Even as a child, my grandmother would tell us stories about how she made a huge difference in people's lives. Back in the day, my grandmother worked at Centera near her home doing entry-level work. Eventually, she became a volunteer and became an employee at Centera. She ended up meeting this older woman, Bernadette Hines. This woman was a patient at the hospital whose family members never came to visit. My grandmother made it a priority to visit her every day until she was discharged. After the lady had discharged, her and my grandmother stayed in touch, and the older woman later expressed how grateful she was for my grandmother throughout those lonely hospital days. My grandma is such a great listener, encourager, determined, devoted to her family, and overall a well-rounded human being. I could go to my grandma for anything, and she would always be there for me. My grandmother was an amazing cook. I mean, with 9 kids, you kind of have to be. But in all seriousness, she made the best honey cornbread Norfolk, Virginia has ever seen. She would be in the kitchen cooking for a whole apartment building every Sunday. Not because she had to, but because it was in her character to do so. My grandmother had no problems feeding the whole neighborhood if she could afford it. And that is the type of soul she was, and made her so near and dear to our hearts. And more than anything else, my grandmother was a God-fearing Catholic woman who went to church every day it was open. She shaped her children and grandchildren's faith in God and steered us in the Lord's path. And for that, I am forever grateful. I remember as a child, I would rather go anywhere else but church with my grandmother. But looking at those memories, I would give anything to see her get ready for church again. It is hard to say goodbye to someone who's had a substantial impact in our lives. It is always hard to lose someone you know or let her go and move on. But if we keep those good memories in our hearts and minds, we can find comfort, and my grandma Dot will always be with us. Just by being here, you're showing that my grandmother had an impact on you. And that is the greatest comfort to me, to know that she touched other people's lives the same way she touched mine. And that is how I'll always remember my great-grandma, Dorothy Hutchins.